Hi, I'm Rashonda. I'm the creator of ArtByRow.com, where you can find over 200 art and drawing tutorials and everything art related. Thank you for joining me today, and we're going to head on over to the art studio and do some drawings. I hope you'll grab a pencil and some paper and draw along with us today. I know you'll have fun. Let's head on over to the studio. Hi, and welcome to the Art by Row studio. Today we're going to be drawing a teddy bear holding a heart. This little guy is really cute. There's a lot of different ways you could change it up, make him look a little bit different. Today's drawing I'm going to be doing on artist trading cards. I love using artist trading cards for many reasons, mostly because they're a little bit smaller, so they don't take quite as long. But also because I enjoy trading them with other artists, or I can simply put them in my binder so I have a nice little portfolio that I can go in and look at some of my drawings that I've done over the months and years. I'm going to do this one on white cardstock, which I've cut down to the size of an artist trading card. You can also do toned paper. I do toned paper quite a bit. It gives a little bit different look. Just something a little different, add some variation to your artwork. There's a lot of really simple things that you can do to change it up a little bit and make your drawings a little unique, something different. Just to experiment, try new things. It's always good to try some new things and experiment a little bit. So for this drawing, for our teddy bear, we're going to start with our basic shapes. So we need two circles. We need a circle for the head and we need a circle for the body. You'll probably want the body to be a little bit bigger than the head, but that is up to you. Maybe you want to try making the head bigger than the body just to give it a different style. That's up to you. But I'm going to do just the basic bigger body, a little bit smaller circle for the head. And then you could also do a line down the middle for your line of symmetry. And then I'm going to do one across the middle of his face, the circle for the head, just to give me an idea of where everything's going to go. Then I'm going to, after I get my basic shapes down, now I want to add my details. So I'm going to do my eyes. Just two circles for the eyes. Now again, you don't have to draw circles for the eyes. You don't have to make the eyes the same size. If you wanted to make it a little goofy looking, you could do one big eye, one little eye. And this is also why I love using artist trading cards, because they're so much quicker to do. You can play around and experiment a little bit more without feeling like you're putting a bunch of time into something that may or may not turn out the way you want it to. So now we're going to do the nose. And again, the nose could be done big, it could be small, it could be an oval, it could be more of like a triangle shape. Just tons and tons of different ways you can add some variation to your artwork. So you can add some eyebrows now if you want to. They can also be added in later, but we're just going through and doing our details. So I'm going to add another circle inside the eye. You can add a little highlight to the nose if you want to. And of course, this stuff can be added in later on as well. The mouth. And again, lots of different ways to be drawing all of this. The mouth could be a different shape. You could not have it connect. You could have just a line down there. And we want to, you can define the shapes a little bit if your lines are too sketchy. I like using these click erasers for cleaning up my artwork. They're a nice size. You can get in there and have a little bit more control over the lines that you're removing with that style eraser. So we can go ahead and put a couple ears on here. Add the insides to the ears again. Lots of different ways you can do that even. All the different things you do with your little details will change the overall look of your teddy bear. And we're going to draw this guy holding the heart. It's going to be a nice big heart that's going to take up most of his body. So now we need to draw where the hands are going to be. So the hands are going to be here and here. And we're drawing very light. I'm drawing a little darker than I normally would to try to help get it to pick up on the camera. But you want to do your drawings as light as you can and still see what you're doing with them, so that you can go back in and erase things and clean it up a little bit. But the reason I like using the basic shapes to get everything where it needs to be is that it's a lot easier to change something if the placement doesn't look quite right or the size isn't quite right. By drawing some basic shapes out first, you can see where everything's gonna go. And it helps to just kind of visualize what it's going to look like when it's done, so that if you do want to make some changes, you can, without having a bunch of time put into it and then realize that something's not quite right, something looks a little bit off, and then you have to erase all the work that you just did. And that feels not that great when you put a bunch of time into it ahead of time and then it's like, oh, no, that's not right. So now we're going to do the feet. So I'm going to have his feet kind of sticking out over here. And these are going to be the bottoms of his feet. And then we'll just connect the legs down here. Same thing over here. We'll connect the leg. I'll clean this up a little bit so you can see what's going on. And we're going to clean all these lines up after we do our outlining, when it's time to move on to the coloring phase of the drawing. And then of course you can do the little pads on the bottom. And again, lots of different ways you could do this. There's a lot of different ways you can draw the feet. A lot of different ways to draw the body, the legs. So the next thing that I want to do with my teddy bear, and you could do this or not, personal choice, depends on how you want it to look. I want to add some texture for the fur. And you can leave it just with straight lines if you want, or you can add a little bit of hair, some fur if you want. Totally up to you. You could make the eyebrows a little bit bigger. You could have part of him having some texture and part of it without. Like I've been saying, there's a lot of different variations you could do with your drawings, with any drawing really, not just this one, but any of them. There's a lot of different ways you can do your drawings. And again, the artist trading cards are really nice because you could do an entire series of teddy bear drawings and do each one a little bit different, just to see what different ideas you can come up with, try some different things, see what they look like, and just kind of play around and experiment a little bit. So the next thing I want to do is to add an outline to my drawing. And I like using these Sharpie pens. This is a black Sharpie pen. I like doing my outlining in black. That's just the look that I like. You can do yours differently if you'd like. If you don't care for the way the black outlines look, feel free to do a different color, or maybe you don't want to do an outline at all. That's up to you. I'm going to be finishing this drawing with markers. So for me, the black complements the markers very well. Again, it also goes with my artistic style. It's what I like. It's what I think looks good. It's the look I'm going for, basically. But you could do something different. You could also use just a marker if you'd rather use a black marker. If you want a thicker outline, you could also use a brush pen. Brush pens, in my opinion, brush pens are really the best tool to use for doing outlines. The problem with brush pens is that there's a bit of a learning curve with them, because you'll get a thicker and a thinner line depending on how you turn the pen and how much pressure you use. But they do make really nice outlines where you can get some nice variation. But because there's a bit of a learning curve for using them, it's going to take a little bit of practice to be able to control using a brush pen. But they do make some really nice outlines, but it's just something you would have to practice. It's been on my list of things to do. I just haven't really, I guess I haven't taken that goal too seriously, because I have not defined what that goal actually is or how to accomplish it. So it is on my list of art goals for 2023. So I suppose if that's something I want to tackle this year, if I'm serious about it, I probably need to start working on figuring out what that's going to actually look like and what I need to start doing. Coming up with some exercises to do and ways to practice, fun ways to practice. It's always easier if it's fun, right? And that's another nice thing about using the artist trading cards, is that it's a great way to practice different things, whether it's a new medium, a new style, or just developing existing styles. Doing the artist trading cards, because they're smaller, they feel a lot more relaxing and more fun to me. So I'm more likely to grab an artist trading card and work on something than I am to want to try to do a full page in a sketchbook that I know is going to take a bunch of time and it doesn't feel as relaxing. But so there is my outline. And you can go back in and add some thickness to some of the lines if you want. That's up to you. You could add a saying inside the heart, like an I love you or something like that if you wanted to. So the next thing is to remove all the pencil lines and get this cleaned up. I like using these big erasers. You can also use a pink pearl eraser. This one is something that, it's an eraser that came with like a set of pencils or something, or a cheap art set, I think. To be honest, I don't even know where I got it from. It came with some other art supplies. But the thing I like about it, it makes a mess, but that mess kind of serves a purpose in that it's sort of a self-cleaning eraser, which is nice, because the other types of erasers tend to pick up the graphite and then they'll smear back onto your paper, which is frustrating when you're trying to get your drawing cleaned up and you're adding to it instead of taking away. But it does make a little bit of a mess, but not a big deal. We just clean that up. And then you may have to go in and touch up your outline a little bit. Sometimes it looks like you got the outline the way you want it. And then when you erase the pencil, you can see a little bit more clearly what's going on. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill these in black. These little pads on the bottom of his feet, I want to be black, I think. And you can make them a different color. You can make them brown. You can make them pink. Lots of different choices there. So that's it for the outline. Now we need to grab some markers and decide on what colors we want to use for this guy. Okay, I got some markers that I want to use. So what I do with my markers is that I use a little scrap piece of cardstock. These are left over from when I do my, when I cut out my artist trading cards. I'll have a little bit left over. And I can just test out my colors on here because I want my colors to blend together. So I like to test them out ahead of time, make sure that they're fairly close, but I want some that are lighter and darker. And I can do that by putting them on the test paper, the little scrap piece of paper, to see how it's going to look. So the way I work with my markers, and I use alcohol markers, is that when I use mine, I lay down the lightest color first, and I'll typically fill in the entire section with the lighter color, even though I know I'm going to be putting a darker color down. And then I'll put my darker color where I want it. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of going over where there would be some shadowed areas. Mostly I just want to break up the big blocks of color and add a little bit of variation. But you want to think a little bit about where the shadows would be and what would make sense so it's consistent throughout your your drawing. Another thing you can do is just go around the edges with the darker color. And I usually use 2 or 3 colors. I did get a third. I got out a kind of this bluish gray color that I like, that I might use. I think maybe I'll use it for some darker areas. But so what I'm doing is working a section at a time, because I want the alcohol in the markers to stay moist when I'm doing it. Because if it's not, if you let that alcohol evaporate, then you're not going to be able to blend your colors together. And if you are using a different color, like if you were using brown, you would do this the same way, just with a lighter brown and a darker brown. I just decided not to go with the brown because that's just your typical standard thought, I think, when doing teddy bears. I think brown is typically the go-to color, so I wanted to do something a little bit different. Change it up a little bit. And you can mix and match your markers. Like this one's a Bic marker. These are touch markers. As long as they're alcohol, as long as they're all alcohol markers, they'll all blend together. And the other thing I get asked sometimes is, if it'll ruin the markers when you go back over the colors, but it does not. I can go over dark color with a light marker and it's not going to transfer that color onto the other markers. So you do not have to worry about ruining your markers and having the colors picking up on the other markers. So I'm just going to keep filling in the fur, doing the same back and forth, putting down the light color, adding some of the dark color, and then I blend it with the light color again. Now you can also use a colorless blender. A lot of markers come with a colorless blender. I typically don't use the colorless blender because I can just use a marker that I already have sitting here. I guess the only reason I really don't use the colorless one most of the time is that I don't find that it's really necessary because I already have this marker. It's already sitting here, so I guess if I don't use the colorless blender, it's one less marker on the desk taking up space. And sometimes if you've worked with markers or even colored pencils or anything and you're layering your colors up and adding multiple colors to a section, it's really easy to grab the wrong marker or colored pencil or whatever and start putting the wrong one down. If you have too many of them sitting on your desk, it can get very easy to mix them up and accidentally grab the wrong one. So I guess the less you have sitting out, the easier it is. But the colorless blenders are nice for really light colors. So like this gray, for example, is pretty light. If I wanted to leave an area white and use this gray to add some shadows, then the colorless blender would be really nice to go in and soften these edges up. Because you would have to find something lighter than this. And there are actually some of the markers that they make and you grab it and go to put down the color to see what it looks like, and it's basically clear. So I do keep those around and I'll use them sometimes, and they mostly just act like the blender anyway. But they come in handy if you're for white areas, if you want to add a little bit of gray or some other color for a shadow and it's just kind of a lighter area. Those come in pretty handy. So again, I'm just trying to break up these big blocks of light gray and adding in some darker areas just to make it a little bit more interesting to look at. Like I said before, there's a lot of different ways you can do everything. There's different ways you can add your color. You could go in and add a little bit more texture throughout. And I guess the other thing I should probably mention is that if you go over an area with the marker, it will darken it up. So if I go over these areas with the light gray, it's going to make it darker even if I just use multiple layers of the same marker. So if you like the way an area looks and you think you're going to go in and just kind of touch it up a little bit, keep in mind that you're actually going to change the way that it looks because you're going to add another layer and it's going to darken it up a little bit. So just keep that in mind and know that as you go over the areas, it will darken that area up again. And the style of marker is probably going to be the most important. So these have this fine point, which is really nice for, especially for artist trading cards. And on the other side, it has this bigger chisel tip, which is nice for big areas. The big markers only have just the one type of nib on it, which works for the most part, but these aren't that good if you're trying to do a really big area. They don't work as nice. I also have some Prismacolors. These are the original markers that I bought. I don't even think they make these anymore, but it's got this bigger end. And then it has this really fine point that, in my opinion, is completely useless. Because for one thing, it tends to not even work. It seems like the ink just doesn't flow through it. Even when they were new, most of these markers are probably 10 years old. And as you can see, they're still working just fine. But even when the Prismacolor, when they were new, that really fine pen point never did seem to do much. And it's probably too small to really do anything anyway, unless you're going to add some really fine detail. So that style of marker has never been my favorite, because it's really hard to get in. You have to kind of angle it, and even then it's hard to keep it where you want it to be and not go outside of the area that you're trying to fill in with it. But I still try to use them. As you can see, I just went outside of the line right there a little bit. But what you can do, I don't know how much this picks up on here, but I can take my light gray and go over top where I went outside of those lines, and I can go over it with that light gray, and it'll basically erase it. It won't take it out completely, but it'll lighten it up and blend it in enough that it's not that noticeable, which is a nice thing about markers if it's still wet. If the alcohol is already completely evaporated, then you're probably out of luck. It might pick it up a little bit. I've never really tried it, to be honest, but you can use it kind of like an eraser and clean it up a little bit. So the only thing left to do with this little guy is to add some white, and I like using a white jelly roll. And you don't have to do this. Again, this is just a personal preference, but you can use it to add some little areas of highlights. I like using the white because it breaks up these big areas, and that's just something that's a personal preference for me. I don't like having big blocks of solid color. If that's something that doesn't bother you, or if you don't like the way the white looks, then it is not necessary to add it. I like it. I like the way the white looks against the marker. So I think that's it for that. And then the only thing left to do now is just to add some kind of a background on here. And again, there's a lot of different ways you could do it. There's a lot of different colors you could add. There's different styles you could do the background in. You could do some kind of little designs or patterns. You could, let's see, we could do, I'm trying to grab another marker here. We could do, maybe we want to just add some little decorations back here. I don't even know what these are, but it's like some little, kind of like some bubble patterns back here. Give them maybe like some little shadow areas down here, so it doesn't look so much like he's floating. And then, let's see, I like adding some blues and purples together. And I need to find, you could do some light purple down here. I like adding the purples and the blues together. I think for like backgrounds and such, it looks nice to have the blues and the purples together. You can blend them in. So if you want to kind of blend the blue and the purple in together, you can sort of just kind of like scrub the edges a little bit and it'll soften that up. Put a little bit more pressure right there. And I'm going to grab a different purple, but I need to check them first. So I'm going to be right back with a different purple to do the background in. All right, so I have a purple. It's a little bit of a pinkish purple. And it kind of matches the heart a little bit too much, but I want to show you another option of what you can do, and we're going to use that colorless blender because this looks a little too dark to me, but I cannot find a marker that's perfect. So we're going to go ahead and use this, and then we're going to change it up a little bit, and I'm going to show you a way that you can use that colorless blender to do that. And that's the bad thing about markers, is the expense can add up quickly because you have to have so many different colors. Oops. You have to have a lot of different colors to be able to have just the right one. And like I said before, a lot of times the colors, once you go to where they're really light, then oftentimes you can't even see them. So this is the colorless blender. And what I'm doing is just adding some of this down. And it'll break up this background a little bit. It makes it a little bit textured, which I think is kind of nice looking. But what it does is it kind of just saturates the pigment. And then it picks some of it up and lightens it up a little bit. Because I do not want that background so dark. And it kind of makes a cool textured background in here, which is nice. I kind of like the way this background looks, so there we go. That's one way you can use the colorless blender. All right, so we're going to call this little guy done. Like I said, you could add some writing in there. I love you, be mine, whatever you want to put in there, but we're going to call that done. I hope you enjoyed this. And don't forget to like and follow, and I will see you in the next video. Well, how'd you do? Did you make some of your own artwork? I hope you did. I hope you felt encouraged and motivated to start some of your own work. And I hope you feel inspired to keep working on your art. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like and make sure you subscribe so you can see more videos from us when they get posted. I'll talk to you soon. Happy creating!